How did the monkey get there? So it puts the children in an embarrassing situation and they're not able to respond.
ፍርድ ቤት አካባቢ ከደረሰ በኋላ ደግሞ የዋስትና መብት የሚሰጣቸዋል።
When cases reach the court, some are released on bail. I do not believe that the law has any provision for bail, and particularly for a crime committed on children. After the perpetrators come on bail, some of these people get engaged in vendetta.
Vendetta is one of the methods the defilers use.
The defiler was sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment. The neighbors who did not like his arrest accused the mother of leading a peaceful life while one of their own was languishing in prison. The lady came to us looking for a place to stay.
How about the criminal laws? Do they have to be revisited?
So what they have to do now, what we now need to ask the government is to assist those local governments down there to come up with local bylaws which the local leaders should enforce, to ensure that these children don't attend those karaoke performances, don't go for night weddings and what have you. Because in those functions, that's where children get a lot of problems. That's when they get abused.
Now, so it's a very comprehensive piece of legislation dealing with sexual offenses. It deals with defilement, it deals with rape, it deals with child pornography. It envisions certain offenses which were not even there previously under existing legislation, like child pornography, child trafficking. Those are not offenses that were there in any existing legislation before. It also provides for minimum sentences.
People have been convicted of rape, but there is nobody who has been convicted of defilement. Because it's a discretional, it's not mandatory like the other, like robbery, murder. Those who have been mandatory, that as long as they prove you murdered, there is only one sentence, death.
Defilement is also aggravated by HIV/AIDS.
When somebody defiles you and you pick infection, that person now did it deliberately. So there is a law coming for HIV, whereby we can prove that this person has infected this child. Secondly, we are trying now to introduce what they call post-exposure prophylaxis. This is a medical term. In other words, to say if a child has been defiled through sex and it is known immediately within less than, I think, 18 or 48 hours, we should have administered antiretroviral therapy.
Mary became a victim when she was a child.
He drove into the nearby forest, then he came to the back of the car and folded up the seats. I started shivering. He told me to undress. It was then that I realized what his plans were and I started struggling. He then did what he had to do.
Asrat is sight impaired and someone took advantage of it.
I had lost some money and he promised to give me some and took me with him.
In a number of child sex abuse scenarios, the perpetrators are often members of the family.
The number of children that are victimized by strangers is not more than 10%. In the majority of cases, the crime is committed by people that the children know.
Traditional system had its own ways of protection.
Extended family system had norms and rules which were very clear. One of the things you should not really do, I should not abuse my child because you will reprimand me. The child belonged, or even a wife, did not just belong to you or me, or the man. They belong to the society. So the community came in to protect both the wife and the mother and the children. And why the living arrangement, everybody did. In African context, children never shared a small room with parents.
She was admitted at a rehabilitation center following incest. Her name is Ganzeb Hail Mariam.
It was my father who molested me in October of 2008, on a Friday when I was a 4th grader. He came home early and asked for some snacks. Around 10 in the evening, I went to bed. My father came and started pulling down my pants. I asked him what he was doing. When I fell asleep, he molested me. I begged him to spare me and stop what he was doing. He told me to keep quiet and defiled me.
The neighbors made some noise and then he let her go. He warned her to keep the story for herself. She said the story to a neighbor who took her to the police but the police failed to take any step. When the police failed her, she told the case to her school teacher. The director became involved and the case against the father was initiated. He was a casual laborer. What is the recourse for incest victims?
Many children are addicted to cigarettes, khat, and hashish. Many of them want to quit, but it's not easy.
Whenever the children have got sexual offenses, there must be an institution where to report to. When they encounter such problems, they do not know where to go.
Yes, and the efforts at documentation indicate a large number of sexually abused children.
By a school called Hallelujah, Harmi Kadir was defiled by her father. Her mother accused her of spreading rumors and kicked her out of the house. The girl committed suicide. Every morning, the father molested his child on the pretext that he was checking her virginity. The girl disclosed the case to the police. To save the marriage, the grandparent took away the child, who was instructed to keep quiet.
Trickery and deceit are the trademarks of traffickers. Their main target, poor rural girls.
In most of the households, there's now evidence that these children end up being used as mistresses by household heads and some of the other people who are in the household dwellings. So there's also an increasing case of trafficking, end up being abused in various forms. But all that creates a certain sense of vulnerability, which actually undermines the ability to take existing opportunities in livelihood.
Trafficking of poor rural girls who end up in prostitution is rife around the region.
But because we have also done a study here on trafficking, covering Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, using our chapters. Let me tell you that there's very high correlation between children being trafficked into child labor. So in fact, trafficking and child labor is more than married. They are very interrelated. A large number of the traffickers are women, that's according to our study. But what do? They go rural homes to look for their relatives, and they say they are taking them to school.
We call them children who find themselves in the worst forms of child labor, because that child domestic worker who ends up moving from the rural area to the urban center in search of domestic work and only ends up as a housemaid will also end up being trapped in some of these vices.
So these people are trafficked for various reasons. There are men out there with a lot of money, and when you accept to sleep with them once, you can get the entire whatever you want. So you get as young as 9-year-old girls being trafficked for sexual purposes.
Trafficking also helps feed the commercial sex business in Addis Ababa.
Who are the traffickers? There's a common saying that I want to mention. When you bear a child and you're involved in day-to-day activities, you start looking for a small girl from the rural areas. When these girls come to the cities, they discontinue their education, they are separated from their parents, they then become exposed to all sorts of abuse. There are two types of traffickers. One of the groups selects the beautiful ones for sexual tourism, while the less attractive ones are recruited as maids.
Kampala is a contradiction of sorts. A tale of two cities where you find the most affluent and the wretched. The latter reside in Kimombasa, a death trap for many young girls. The name Kimombasa originated from the port town of Kenya. That port town is famous for its commercial sex. Young girls are trafficked to Kimombasa. Very few escape and the rest remain entrapped and become victims of poverty, HIV/AIDS, childbearing, or teenage pregnancy. Trafficking and poverty are intertwined, and witchcraft seals that bond.
It's our culture. Now these are spears for the ancestors. These are pipes. These contain tobacco. Should I light for you now to see? They contain tobacco. This tobacco In our tradition, our ancestors used to smoke it whenever they had problems, and these problems would cease. That's how we do it. The type of people that come here, some are married women, and then the prostitutes that I live with. They smoke it when looking for customers that can buy them. Sometimes they get them, and those that fail get back and resettle. For the number I have about 50. Some work during the day, they are in Kisenyi and also at the channel.
Prostitution has been hard to eradicate. Could it be legalized to ensure that the industry is properly regulated and rights of the stakeholders guaranteed?
For me, I'm saying, let us regulate prostitution. You know, that's the middle line between legalizing, because we cannot legalize prostitution now.